By popular demand, we're going to play around with Quad Remesher some more. And we're going to play around with creating some rather maniacal stuff like this. And it should be a lot of fun. It's very fast as well. And it's building off of that last video. But that last video I did, the Quad Remesher workflow video, was a little bit misleading. That's kind of a special case use in working with it in that manner. And there are times you might want to do that. But this way is going to be a lot more effective and it's a lot more fun. So it does take a little while to get started with this thing, though. You got to build something first. So if you're going to use cylinders, use high vertex counts on them. It helps quite a bit. I'm going to jump into a side view here real quick and rotate it. Hold R and hold control while doing that, or hit R and hold control. All right, so something like this. If we were to take this piece here and we did a bevel on it, hit C to clamp. You can mouse wheel up. You can do this number. Okay, hit A, M, merge by distance. You'll have doubles. All right, now quad remesher. I was showing how you can use normal splitting. We're still going to utilize that, but we're going to do something even more interesting on top of that. So a lot of people have probably tried it, the material split system. If you haven't seen that yet, the way usually it goes is someone builds a mesh and then they go around and add a bunch of materials to it. And that's great, but it's slow and it's tedious. It's not a lot of fun. So what you want to do is you want to create a new material, and you can make this material whatever you want. You can change the color of it to say like, let's just do cyan real quick. Okay. I'm going to copy this, hit Control C as you hover over it. And in viewport display, you can also Control V down here and change the viewport display if you wanted to do something like that. Now I have a bunch of materials already set up like this, so I won't be creating no more in that manner. Instead, what I'll be doing is I have these set up for my asset browser already. So you just create some materials, save a Blender scene, and you can tag, right click, mark assets, set up your asset browser so you can load all this stuff in, right? But basically, I have a whole bunch of them already set up like that. So I can click the little plus sign here a number of times, pull that down, and you can see we got these material slots. And this is where it gets good. You can drag and drop these over here. You don't have to do anything else other than that. So quite good. Throw a white in there. Why not? And like a dark gray as well. So how many materials you'll need to split things up is entirely up to your project, how intense it gets. But for the most part, this is what we're doing. Bunch of materials on the base object here. Shade auto smooth. Okay, now you can take this piece, you can duplicate it, move it down, scale it, move it over, do something like this if you want. So you can start doing the Boolean Ngon workflow very comfortably this way. You can mirror things across using machine tools. And this isn't meant to be a modeling video, but we're going to go ahead and grab this, do a Boolean subtraction. We have something like this going on, right? So QE, bring that cutter back with hard ops, if you're using hard ops. And we can go ahead and this model here, we built it off this base one, so it has all these extra materials. We actually don't need all these, so we can just get rid of all of them real quick and then just pick one we want to use in case, let's say red. Okay. So material splitting, right? This is what we're going to end up using, material splits, along with normal splitting. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is that when you use split normals, the normal splitting, you shade things auto smooth, these sharp edges like this, they're split normals usually. Okay. Watch my shading video if you don't fully understand that. But um, the thing is that certain times you want to split things, but you can't tag the edges sharp because it's a boolean, right? And it's not live, and so you'd have to collapse your mesh, and it causes a lot of problems. And so this method, here, however, on the other hand, we can go around and we can just freely cut. I could turn on box cutter, use the in-gun cutter, and we can just freely cut things. And where we can't tag things as sharp, we can use instead, we can use the materials to do the tagging for us. Plus, this helps uh, Quad Remesher anyways, just kind of figure out what's going on the shape and what's happening anyways. So it's quite good. It will get fairly heavy as far as polygons go, and it will start to slow down at some point. So you might want to have a pretty beefy system even doing this, but it's not too bad. So, we did a subtraction here. This cutter, we want to make sure we just give it a color. Shade it auto smooth, okay? Make sure everything's shaded auto smooth. If you hide your cutters like I do, you want to hit Alt H, shade auto smooth everything, okay? And you can hit 1 to hide the first collection or hide the second, all the collections except for the first collection. So 1, 2, right? You get the idea. Okay. This isn't in a collection, so it doesn't hide now. All right. All right. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and go through this and keep adding stuff to it if we wanted to. Any kind of shape we can imagine for the most part will work. You do have to be a little bit careful though, because some things just simply won't work well. All right. So little small tertiary details can sometimes work, but a lot of times they still fail. You'd have to maybe do those a little bit later on via sculpting or maybe doing a second round of quad remeshing, which is what I was kind of showing in the previous video, where you can kind of work a mesh that's already been quad remeshed and you can keep working it basically by doing more booleans on that. And so that might be a possibility for you, something you might want to do. Also, some of these cutters, sometimes you want to cut the cutter and you will have to assign as many materials to this base cutter that you need in order to make it work with additional cuts inside of it. So, like if I was to go through and I was trying to use like a box cut here, for example, real quick, and hold shift and click, and I like to do manual bevels still in these areas, but if I was trying to do something like that, you'll see it's just green. So if I was to change this to something like blue, it doesn't take effect. The base cutter also needs a new slot of blue, and then the base model as well needs that same material. So you kind of compound those things up in that manner like that. Usually this works out fine. So it's not only going to split on the color, but it's going to split on the uh, normals as well, the binormals. So we can just keep going, guys, literally. And it's just that simple. We want to make a quad sphere. That's fine. We could take the quad sphere and select all of this through here, press E and then Y. You can make a pill like that as well. That number. Maybe place it here, mirror it, give it a color. We'll use yellow again. Why not? And so we could do a Boolean cut there, perhaps like that. Okay. So we can make all kinds of cool shapes and design choices here at this point. We could keep going. All right. Just keep going. Do another cut here. Shift click. Oh, I want to bevel this one. All right. Give it a color. And we'll give it a white one. So we can also create facing using something like a big cube. All right. Take a big cube, stretch it all the way out. Let's do something like that. We can mirror it as well, and then we can do a Boolean cut. Actually, assign this a material real quick. I'm not sure which ones this needs yet, though. We'll use white for now. Do the cut first, and then see if it works. Oh, it does. Okay. So yeah, we can do some big stuff like this rather quickly, right? Really cool workflow, really fun, and I mean, the sky's the limit, really, right? You just kind of figure out where you might need a bevel if you want to do like a big bevel like that. You can apply scale if you mess your scale up too. So you get kind of a different result out of it, perhaps. And so, like this would normally drive you crazy because you can't mark this edge sharp. Now you don't have to worry about that because the material will take care of it, right? This will probably still fail too. I want to point that out that more than likely it's not going to go just the way you think it should. It might still have a little bit of an issue. Okay. And we'll try to solve that here in a second, but we can't do loop cuts. We can't do minor pushing and pulling of polygons around. So we can do like cool little bevel things like this, perhaps. And we can create some really cool maniacal shapes, basically. All right. With all that out of the way, this is just a solid mesh for the most part, except I didn't join this too. Let's join it real quick. Let's try it again. Let me turn box cutter off real quick. All right. Hide my stuff real quick. Oh, we didn't mirror that one. Let's try mirroring it too. All right. There we go. So I'm using machine tools to mirror. Pretty wild little piece. All right, cool. So here's the thing. This has a lot of surface area. And our quad count, you're going to have to play around with quad counts in order to get this to work correctly. But you want to make sure you put it where you think it's appropriate. You'll get the hang of kind of like estimating what kind of amount you need. But basically, this one to me is looking like a 40. I think it's 40,000. But I might be wrong. If it has mesh errors, you might want to just control Z back, change the quad count, and try remeshing it again. That could help out quite a bit. But set your quad count appropriately for the amount of surface area it might have, and then you can do adaptive size all the way up. Okay, and then we can use materials and use normal splitting all at the same time. We don't have to use symmetry if we're making things that are asymmetrical, but if they're symmetrical, you could use symmetry if you want. I'm not too worried about it because I just want to see what happens as I remesh it as it is right now. Also, you want to make sure you have a good amount of segments on all your bevels because there's no really going back and fixing that. The only thing you can really do is if you don't have enough edges when you remesh and it looks faceted, you can use a smooth modifier or corrective smooth modifier, but it blurs the edges a little bit. Okay, so just keep that in mind. As we go through this process now, we're just going to hit remesh. We will still more than likely get errors. We sometimes still have to fix things manually, but for the most part, it does pretty well. It's just remeshed just that fast. Not a big deal. Okay. And we could probably find some errors in here if we look really closely. Sometimes you have some weird poles in areas. Sometimes just things go wrong. In this case, this was kind of an ideal situation. Usually, if you focus on bigger shapes, primary and secondary shapes, it works out quite well. When you start getting into tertiary stuff, that's when you're going to have a lot of issues. So you can use like a multi-res on this. You can start sculpting on this thing a little bit if you wanted to. So you could use hard surface alphas potentially here in Blender and have a little bit of fun with it if you really wanted to. And once again, from the last video, the Quad Remesher workflow video, this should look awfully familiar. We were working on something similar to this, and we were just cutting into something like this and then remeshing that. Same process applies here. If you wanted to do that, you could. And so if you ever needed to make additional little tertiary details, this is actually one of the better that would be one of the better ways of doing it, actually, is going back through this and working those details in at this point. Um, however, we're not going to be doing that. Instead, I just wanna kinda look at everything, just see give you guys an idea of what's going on here, and we're not gonna do that just yet or anything like that anyways. We're actually not gonna do that in this video at all, but, let's go to single material real quick. So if you wanna think of this as just one object, it's been quad remeshed, alright? We can duplicate this thing out, alright? And let's say we wanna array this. We array it up, down, we could do something like that, right? And so we'll keep it as this like that right now, but we could create another object, start working on another one. All right, same process applies here. Okay, position it accordingly so these objects will meet up with each other. We do a big bevel here or a big chamfer, whatever we want. Symmetrize it. We can do some basic modeling on it if we really wanted to. But I think it's kind of redundant to do that when you could just do, like, say, with machine tools, you can just separate a face using Smart Face, or you Shift D, duplicate P, separate selection, all that fun stuff. But we could take this new shape here, basically, we just created, extrude it, push it back in, we do a Boolean subtraction, boom, just like that. And so we can have a lot of fun with this, guys. We can just keep going, doing all kinds of different shapes and cuts and edits. This would probably be a separate piece, all right? You don't always wanna combine everything together, it wouldn't make sense. If you're working on a project, you know, kinda make it how it would be maybe in real life, break it down into its parts and pieces and use this kind of workflow with each individual part and piece. It might work out much better for you than trying to do everything together as one piece. But I just wanna prove a point here by doing this, okay? That you can do stuff like this potentially. So maybe I want these to be, rounded. And then I want to separate that and extrude it out and scale it down and push it back in. And I just want to do a Boolean cut here into that one. Okay, you can see where this is going. We need materials for it though. Oh, I don't need to create a new one. I just need some slots. Okay, keep it kind of simple here for now. We'll use white. You see, when you quad remesh, by the way, it's going to duplicate your materials. So don't get too carried away with the material colors and quad remeshing and then working and remeshing. And like you could, but try to keep it in a couple iterations maybe. All right, and we'll go with one more. I think we'll just use the yellow. All right, and so that way, when we do a boolean here, and we boolean union it or boolean subtract it from that one, right? This one's going to need two slots then, basically. So got one cutter. So we can use white for the base. We'll go to material preview so we see what we're doing, and then we could do maybe green here. So this base needs the green as well. All right, so you can see how that's working out. Now this base over here has a number of them. So this one is white. This one we can make, we'll get rid of white just real quick. Actually, let's bring it down. Yeah, okay, so it turned blue for this one. we're gonna Boolean union this right off the bat here because I just want to make sure this is all working correctly. I don't want this one as white, so I guess we'll give this one a different color over here. We were using white. Let's do yellow. Okay, that'll work out better, I think. And we could maybe scale that one too. Yeah, we'll do individual origins and scale. Oh, it's got an array on it. That's why it's doing that. I had it set to parent to everything so it would scale uniformly across the board, but somehow I broke it, I think. So let's just keep going with that. Let's make that push in a little bit further. It's a little shallow. Okay, there you go. This base mesh here, it's pretty much good to go. The normal splitting should catch the edges here. But if you ever need to assign another material to the base as well, you can always do that. Like you can grab these and assign red or whatever. It might just help Quad Remesher out, who knows. But we do have this base set up now like this. These are already Quad Remesh. This is now pretty much good to go for the most part by the looks of it. I do believe these are unions in there, hopefully. Okay, so let's do Shade Auto Smooth. Make sure everything, actually, Alt H, bring everything back. Let's just make sure it's all shaded auto smooth. Press 1, hide it all. Got the base. Everything's still set. This is a pretty big piece by itself, but I think it's not going to use any more than this one. So we should be able to just remesh this off the bat. And you can see it. Sometimes it will have issues with topology still. I want to mention something about that. If you can use loop cuts, you can usually add loop cuts in it, but make sure they're going across the whole thing. In some situations, that's not always possible. So if you want, you can use hard ops and you can go ahead and do something like mesh tools and dice. And you can see we're going to dice on Z, not X. So we press Z and we mouse wheel up a bit. You might want to dice it a few times, perhaps. And you don't have to dice every angle or every axis, but just a couple times, and they don't have to be super dense usually. Just something simple like that. A lot of times that will help out certain cutters and shapes, so you can dice these things up a little bit. So let's just do only on Z in this case, and just do a few times like that right there. All right. So now when we go ahead and click remesh this time, hopefully we get a little bit better topology out of it. If not, we got to bump up the quad counts, so you'll have to finagle those things a bit. But you can see, in fact, how dicing does help something like that out. Also, sometimes you might get topology that just goes in directions you don't want it to go. Just keep in mind, if you're using normal splitting, you can just mark some edges sharp here or there, and that will actually help guide some of that topology around. So if we were to go back real quick, and let's try that on this one just to prove a point. Maybe one of these edges through this area towards the center would be ideal, or the edges on the top and the bottom here. You can mark these as sharp, perhaps. I'm going to symmetrize this real quick just so I don't have to do it over there as well. And I should be able to symmetrize to the bottom too, but I don't trust that one entirely. Let's see. Let's mark these ones sharp as well. See if that helps out on those little areas there. So it wasn't really even that bad, but we'll quad remesh that just to show you kind of the thing there, how it does that. Yeah, so you can see it keeps that one that's sharp a little bit straighter, and the other ones are still kind of a little off, and that's why I'm saying sometimes doing the top or the bottom size of a bevel might also help. But it does create a sharp effect there, just something to keep in mind anyways. So you can see this is all a solid piece now though. For the most part, we don't have any issues. That's nice. So when we look at this in this at this type of manner here, dense mesh, they're meeting at very sharp angles right here. So we could actually move that back even if we wanted, something like that maybe. We could play around with the setup here on how we want it to look, but I'm gonna leave them a little bit separated like that. I kind of like it. So we could do something like that. We could take these Boolean union into this one, okay? And there you go. Shade everything auto smooth, and make sure they have good color separation as well. It could be quite useful. You might have to tweak some things, but there we have it. Shade auto smooth. We have 3 of these, and these were at 40,000. This was at 40,000, so you guessed it. Our count goes up quite heavily because of something like this, but I'm just gonna set it to 200,000. Hopefully, we have no issues. It's not guaranteed, but, it should work out quite well. So now, let's remesh it, see what happens. I think we're good to go. As long as we don't have subdivisions applied to this and everything's shaded auto smooth still with these materials on it, we shouldn't have a big issue. Quad remesher can hang when you get to these higher quad counts as well, but in this case, I think we'll be just fine. So we'll see. And so let's review it now. Let's go ahead and just take a look. And the colors can be distracting. So if you don't want to use those viewport display colors, that's fine. I would recommend still creating them, but switching your shading mode here to single instead of material, if that's something that bothers you. Okay. But you can see for the most part, I think we got it. All right. And so this is it's not looking too bad. They're relatively simple shapes, so they're not too bad. Here you can see one little error. So a lot of times you do end up having errors still. There's sometimes it's unavoidable. Fortunately, these things are usually pretty easy to fix. What you would do is just maybe take a knife tool, run it through this area real quick, take this vertex, and all you got to do is move it around a little, press G, move it out into position here. Perhaps try to get it in the best position possible. Just kind of look around and see what you got going on. You see, we can take these two, press J and join. Might even dissolve, maybe, perhaps, but in this case, no. We have a nice weird quad down here. I'm just trying to figure out if I could do anything better here, perhaps. And there definitely almost always is something better you can do. You may want to just go ahead and just to be on the safe side here, mark these as sharp. I'm going to dissolve these ones real quick. I'm not sure how this will subdivide. Let's shade it smooth and subdivide one time. Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit rough, so we'll have to do more cleanup on this when you're doing edit mode with subdivision, turn it off, okay? We may have to clean it up more and dissolve some things back for now just to see kinda like maybe we can get some better ideas by doing that, who knows? I don't see an edge that really wants to run into it other than this one down here, which is going back that way somewhere, so, we could just do, maybe a cut from here to here, a redirect down to that way, and now we got that going on, that's good, so those are all quads in there. We could try doing a cut from here to here and doing a redirect to there. Now that's going to create a little bit of tension in this area. So this has a big E-pole and try to, it might look a little bit bad because of that. I'm going to show you another fix for that in a second, but some of this mesh might have done this in a number of different areas. So you do have to go back. You have to check it, correct it if needed. But you can see this is subdividing right now. It is quad remeshed. We are not running into any major issues for the most part. By the looks of it. Check the wireframe. So if you're not using this wireframe, put it on a hotkey. It's quite useful, and we can get through this whole thing right now. All right. So this kind of mesh is really most useful for doing high poly meshes that you want to bake down to a lower poly mesh later on, perhaps. It's not like an extremely optimized mesh that would be necessarily something that you want to use in like a big scene that you're rendering. You'd have to work this down to a lower poly state. And so there's different ways you can go about doing that. But you could just maybe apply like a level one subdivision and we can go ahead and decimate this and we can do just a regular decimation here and change the value to whatever we see fit. Let's just do a point 0.3 and we'll go from a million triangles, 700,000 faces, and we'll see what point 0.3 ends up with here. And it's taking us down to 344,000. And the shading doesn't really change, guys. Like it's pretty much the same setup here for the most part. And so what it's doing is it's decimating mostly the flat planar surfaces first, and then it'll start working away at the edges a little bit. But it tries to maintain the curvature, which is quite good. So you could still potentially bake this thing out. And if you have to make corrections in areas, there's another error that we could have fixed. But if we have to make corrections, we have to make corrections. Yeah, but for the most part, pretty solid overall. I think this is about the best way you can use Quad Remesher. Combo that up with that previous video I did, and you got a killer little combo there where you can just really make a bunch of maniacal stuff happen relatively easily, right? So, with all that in mind, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll check you out on the next one. All right, take care.